Welcome back. Iran has been in the global headlines for much of the past year over its bellicose president and his war of words with the Bush administration over Tehran's nuclear program. In most people's minds, the Iranian-American conflict dates back to 1979 and the revolution that led to the establishment of the Islamic Republic. However, this is a story that actually goes back much further than that. The Listening Post's Shireen Sadeghi now on the coup d'etat of 1953, the role the CIA and the Iranian media played in it, and the repercussions that are still being felt today.
This is what a 21st century propaganda war looks like.
These people are out to kill us.
He criticized the United Nations for remaining silent on Israel's crimes against Palestinians.
We should have bombed somebody.
24-hour news channels from the West beaming out the Bush administration's line on regime change in Iran. The Iranians fighting back through the media outlets they control. But it's not the first time the media have been used in a foreign push to change the government in Tehran. It happened in August 1953, when the Iranian press was manipulated to help topple the country's democratically elected government, led by Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh.
The strategy of the CIA and the British was to actually bribe both politicians and the media to bring down the Mossadegh's government.
Nobody really knows how many reporters were on the payroll, although we did have an authoritative estimate that at least 70% of the newspapers in Tehran were directly or indirectly being bribed by the CIA during this period.
Mossadegh had just nationalized Iranian oil, wrenching it away from the British. The Americans needed convincing to join a coup effort, so the British played the Red Scare card. It was the early days of the Cold War, and this hit home for Americans worried that Iran could be next for a communist takeover.
When the United States wanted to overthrow a government, we usually did it by a direct invasion. But when the Cold War began, it was not possible for the United States to do that anymore. Any direct military intervention by the United States would risk a counter-intervention from the Soviet Union, and that could spiral out of control into a nuclear holocaust. So the United States was looking for another way to shape events in foreign countries.
The result was a new, more subtle model for overthrowing a government, a predominantly non-military coup using many tools, including the media, to reinstall a puppet monarch, the Shah of Iran.
The role of the media in Iran and the role of the Iranian journalists is astonishing when you think of it, that they were easily bribed with a few $1,000s to go against their own government. And I think that is a shame on the newspapers, those who were involved in the coup.
Operation Ajax, as the coup was called, was run by Kermit Roosevelt, a senior CIA officer in the Middle East at the time. Roosevelt wrote a detailed report on what happened, a document that was declassified in 2000. In it, he described the anti-Mossadegh newspaper articles as, quote, gray propaganda. He talked about the political cartoons that demonized the prime minister, and he revealed that it wasn't just Iranian journalists who were behind the articles.
Many of the articles that were published in the Iranian press were actually written in Washington by the CIA, translated and sent to Iran, and then the Iranian journalists just put it in their paper.
There was almost no slander you could imagine against Mossadegh that did not appear at some point in some of these newspapers. These newspapers would churn out articles day after day about Mossadegh being a spy, a homosexual, a Jew, weak, corrupt, anything that they thought would undermine his image.
He said, no, let them write what they want. He specifically said this, these are his own words, let the press be free, let them even write against me. That is a part of, belief in democracy, and that is how we are going to have a democratic state, is to let the people speak, to let the media speak, to have freedom of speech, and to have a free press.
The first attempt at the coup failed, and the Shah fled the country. Then the CIA and others at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran went into overdrive, and 4 days later, on August 19, 1953, the Shah was returned to power.
Former Premier Mossadegh's ruined house is a mute testimony to 3 days of bloody rioting, culminating in a military coup from which the one-time dictator of Iran fled for his life.
The Shah's increasingly autocratic rule lasted until the popular revolution that ended with the establishment of the Islamic Republic in 1979. Resentment against the Shah and his collaboration with the United States to control Iran had reached boiling point. Then, in October 1979, a group of Iranians, fearing a repeat of 1953, took matters into their own hands. They stormed the U.S. Embassy, the same building Roosevelt engineered the coup from, and took American diplomats hostage.
At this time in Iran, 50 Americans are still held captive, innocent victims of terrorism and anarchy.
The resulting crisis lasted more than a year, but when the Western media reported on it, the symbolic significance of the embassy and the importance Iranians attached to the building was largely left out of the story.
Every day you saw pictures throughout America of Iranians in the street denouncing United States, angry in the street, basically showing their emotions against the United States. And the media didn't explain why people were angry. The viewer in America basically came to the conclusions that Iranians were overly emotional, overly angry, erratic.
I don't think there was a real desire on the part of the American press to get inside the minds of Iranians and understand how they were thinking, what they were doing. It was much easier to paint them as blind, nihilistic fanatics. Once you start to think maybe these people have a reason for doing what they're doing, it makes you think maybe what we're being told about why we are behaving as we are isn't quite true.
What happened in Iran in 1953 has been called the world's first media coup, and it had implications for the news media that rippled well beyond Iran and the Middle East. It became a template for CIA intervention operations as far away as Africa and Latin America. The next year, when the U.S. helped overthrow the democratically elected Guatemalan government, it targeted the media again. And leftist revolutionaries like Ernesto Che Guevara learned lessons that Iran's revolutionaries would also heed a quarter-century later.
So, Che Guevara tells Castro, when we take over in Cuba, let's make sure we have a dictatorship. Let's make sure there are no opposition newspapers for the CIA to bribe. This is the reason why Iran does not allow open media, or one of the reasons. It's because they realize that the CIA will take advantage of a free press and wind up subverting it and bribing editors and newspaper reporters to weaken the regime.
Even today, Iranian television continually relives the repercussions of the 1953 coup and reminds Iranians of the den of spies at the U.S. Embassy. But Iranians, whose everyday lives are so poignantly impacted by 1953, need no reminder. Their government's precautions against another foreign intervention has left Iranians without many personal freedoms, an open press being just one of them.
And finally, it's a musical duel that's been played out many times since it was written by Irving Berlin in 1946 when Annie got her gun. But now it's been reincarnated on the World Wide Web, featuring two American political duettists. Perhaps we could have done better, but Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton's cartoon version of Anything You Can Do is our Internet Video of the Week. We'll see you next time at The Listening Post.
Any mud you can throw, I can throw harder. Dig up the worst mud and throw it on you. You did coke.
Iraq vote.
And you smoke.
Effing squat.
Your madras.
Your big ass, your fat ass.
If I become president,
I can do better, at least better than our dumb president now.
No, you can't.
Yes, I can.
Here's my plan.
Naughty rat.
Cakewalk
No,
man.
you can't.
Yes, I can.
No, you can't.